Hello everyone, this is Umar and I'm representing Dastan, and on behalf of Accountability Lab in Dastan, I cordially welcome you to this particular session titled Paving Ways for Active Engagement of Pakistan in the OGP. So before we go ahead, let's have a little bit of information or a little bit of background that what exactly is OGP. And before we even delve deeper into that, let's have a look at a little bit of the house rules. So what exactly is OGP? OGP, oh yeah, so let's go with the house rules first. So for the house rules, yeah, so be respectful and be precise. And similarly, whenever you are speaking, make sure that we would have a proper session where where we have dedicated the slots where you can ask questions. And if you have any question, you can simply drop them in the chat box and do not interrupt and respect the other person's views. And for all the speakers, I'll request that please make sure that your videos are on, and for the participants, please keep your mics on mute, and you can keep your videos on as well if you want. So let's move towards what exactly is OGP. So OGP is basically Open Government Partnership. And you can think of it like this, like OGP is a partnership based on the idea that open government is more accessible, more responsive, and more accountable to the citizens. And the improving relationship between the people and the government has long term exponential benefits for everyone. OGP is a broad partnership that includes members at the national and local level and thousands of civil society organizations. Through the partnership, these powerful forces work together to co create 2 year plans with concrete steps, commitments across a broad range of issues. So, this particular unique model ensures that the civil society organizations or direct citizens' engagement has a role in shaping and overseeing governments. So, interestingly, more than 4,000 commitments have been made globally. And when we talk about openness, or you can say transparency, this is more like a formal process. Like, you have civil societies at the grassroots level, and then you also have government bodies who are in the governing position. So, what steps are the government making to make sure that the people at the grassroots level are getting their basic rights fulfilled? Are there right measures available? Are there right policies available? Are there channels available using which people at grassroots level can get justice, can get their basic rights? So, all these things come together under the umbrella of open government partnerships. So, what happens is that most of the countries, they have to apply for the open government partnership membership. And I am representing here Pakistan, and on behalf of Dasan and Accountability Lab Pakistan, today our main talk will revolve around the main issues that how Pakistan can regain its status for open government partnership. We have esteemed speakers from the government, civil sector organizations, and from the OGP as well. So, who will be discussing and highlighting the areas, and we will be listing the key steps that what we need to do to make this thing happen. We will also move the discussion towards this particular aspect, that how the youth, who are the future of the country, and interestingly, in Pakistan, youth is very much like more than 50% of the population is youth. So, how can we make sure that all these youth and the people can be engaged to work together towards this grander vision of open government partnership? So, first of all, our first speaker is Mr. Fayaz, and he is currently the country director of Accountability Lab Pakistan. So I welcome you, Fayaz, and I would like that you share a little bit about what exactly is the current status of OGP in Pakistan, and what exactly have Accountability Lab Pakistan been doing in Pakistan regarding this particular process? Over to you.
Thank you, Umar. Thank you, esteemed participants, all guest speakers. Let me join Umar to welcome you all to this session. Umar, before I talk about where we stand as a country, as a signatory to the Open Government Partnership, let me go back and talk more about, just in a few seconds about the history of this initiative. OGP actually is a multilateral initiative that was started back in 2011 by 8 different international governments, national governments. The purpose was to, to sort of proactively and voluntarily open up their respective government departments for the citizens, and admitting that citizens are the real or probably the biggest stakeholders of any government. There are 4 principles or 4 values of the Open Government Partnership that include open government, civic participation, transparency, accountability at the hands of the citizens, and use of digital, which means that in this progressive times, we have to adopt all those technologies which facilitate, the interaction between citizens and the state in the most comfortable manner, in the most feasible manner. Now, Pakistan signed up for the OGP back in 2016, in December 2016. There was a lot of fanfare about it, and the government at that time seemed to be championing the concept of OGP in the country. Before signing up for that, Pakistan met the criteria of being a member to the OGP. We got probably around 14 or 15 out of the 16 required points. And then, because we were already following those practices that required a country to be a part of the OGP initiative. However, as soon we signed up for that, the government started dragging its feet on that. Probably although the civil society interaction going on, quite a few civil society organizations, they were in touch with the government. They were doing orientation sessions for the various government departments. Economic Affairs Division, that was point of contact with for the OGP, planning, planning and development departments at provincial level, various departments at district level, and sort of hand holding them through the process and telling them what should probably constitute into a good national action plan for the OGP. We did end up sort of developing our national action plan. It was not very progressive, and part of the reason was that government, despite the orientations that were led by the civil society organizations, they had their own apprehensions, and the only solution to that was the civil society organization would continue to do advocacy around it and continue to tell the government that this is something which can bridge the trust deficit between the state and the citizens. However, ever since that, although the current regime, PTI regime, which sort of informally championed the cause of the open government, they wanted to open it up, and they wanted to sort of proactively share all the citizens related information with the citizens. They too have dragged their feet. We have missed more than 3 we have missed deadlines over 3 cycles for the OGP. We haven't submitted our national action plan. In this year, February, we were sort of, our status was declared inactive. This is sort of a final warning, if a country does not share its national action plan and, for the given periods, then its status is declared inactive, and it remains so for a year, for about a year, after which, we are formally sort of, I don't want to use that word, but sort of kicked out of that international consortium. Now that is the status. Meanwhile, government of at Accountability Lab, in collaboration with other civil society organizations, we have continued to advocate about the OGP. We have been speaking to the businesses, and our modus operandi is in that we go to them and we speak to them, and we sort of ask them the kind of challenges which they face because of lack of clarity on part of the government, on various things, starting from having an electricity sort of meter to acquiring land and filing their taxes and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, every single thing comes down to this one fact, that if the government were open, business environment, civil society environment, state of education, state of health, state of infrastructure, all those things have been in a much better state, in a much better shape. government has taken its own initiatives, which it thinks, is a step towards opening up the government. But and then, those steps are contested. Despite the fact that the government thinks that they are a step towards opening up the government. There is no there is no monitoring from any independent civil society organizations or from the citizens. There is no formal reporting on that. There is no formal umbrella under which those bodies have been created. So yeah, we have 1 year now. As you said, youth is probably the biggest stakeholder in this country. We are probably about 67% of the total population, and they are frustrated the way, past few governments have been run, the way, citizens have not been admitted and accepted as the legitimate stakeholders of the government. They are frustrated about it, and they really want to sort of, provide their input towards changing the system. What civil society organizations like us have been doing is that we have been educating them that, rather than, demanding for so many things, there is one umbrella initiative which is called OGP, Open Government Partnership. And if we can, sort of, stick to that one demand, that can sort of help us find solutions to so many of the challenges that we are frustrated with. That's that. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer that. I don't want to take time from our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fayaz, for sharing your views. So next up, we have Mr. Daniel from KP government. So yeah, so Daniel, I would like to ask that at the sub-national level, the KP government has applied to be a member of the OGP. So how can we, the CSOs, support this cause, especially through engaging youth in it? So what are your views about this?
Thank you, Umar, for giving me the opportunity to talk today. And thanks to all the participants and my fellow speakers for waking up so early and joining the session today. So KP government was considered as to be one of the most active provincial governments in Pakistan who are promoting the open access and open data. And to quote an example here, the Right to Information Commission is a big example of that. But now I believe the government lacks the strategic vision on why the sub-national commitments must be a priority for the government. How can the open government partnership make the governance system more open to the public, and how can it improve the whole governance system? So I wouldn't be wrong to say that the private sector and the civil society has been kind of more proactively pushing the agenda of the OGP as compared to the government. And of course, because of ease of doing business, because of compliance, transparency, it is good for the civil society, it is good for the businesses as well. Having said that, in the KP government sector, efforts are being made. Initiatives are being taken. It's not that efforts are not made, but these efforts and initiatives are somehow limited to the respective departments, and which does not fall directly under the umbrella of the OGP sub-national action plan, which we have. That is an issue. For example, I would like to mention an example over here of a government department. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa IT Board, which is a government department, and the principles on which it is based are digital economy, digital governance, digital skills, and digital access. They have some brilliant initiatives in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which I would like to quote some of those projects which have been initiated, but these initiatives are limited to this respective department. And these, just look at this, Umar, like these initiatives are really amazing, like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Citizen Facilitation Center. Now, this center acts like an interface between the government and the public. The public can access information from this facilitation center. The second initiative that the KP IT board has, Itla. Itla is an Urdu word which means to report. Now, this is the digitization of the police FIR system, an amazing initiative. The third initiative by KP IT board is called Process Survey Agency. Now, what it does is that it is responsible for the issuing of the summons and the notices from the different courts. Now, these are amazing initiatives. And another one is Asasi. Asasi is an Urdu word which means assets. Now, this is a project in which the government departments can request information from the respective other government departments. However, it is limited only within the government circles, but as a starting point, it is a good initiative towards the bigger goal of OGP. So it is not that the government has not taken initiatives, but they have taken initiatives, but again, they are doing it in silos. And I believe that if these initiatives come under the umbrella of the OGP sub-national action plan, that would make it more convenient to the public as well as to the governments. From the perspective of the civil society, I would like to quote the example of the Accountability Lab, because I'm from the academic sector. So academic sector has done a couple of workshops, boot camps, trainings with Accountability Lab to empower the young entrepreneurs, the business community, the private sector on how to use OGP as a tool to for business compliance, for ease of doing businesses, and for accountability and transparency. So this is the perspective of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in terms of OGP.
Sure. Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing such interesting examples that what exactly is KP government doing in this regard. So now I'll move towards Shreya. Shreya, I wanted to ask that given the Pakistan's inactive OGP status, so how can we, the CSOs, support the government to re-engage with the OGP process so that Pakistan is not expelled from it? Like you have a lot of experience. I would specifically want you to share a little bit about the case studies, that how we can learn from them and what mistakes are we making, which we can, using this particular platform and this conference, we can tell the government that this is what you need to do right now.
Great, thanks for that question, Omar, and good morning, everyone. Thank you to Accountability Lab for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. It's really heartening to see the interest, the energy, the enthusiasm for OGP and open government, shine brightly amongst Pakistani civil society, youth organizations, and even subnational governments. Even as you have rightly said, engagement at the national level with the partnership has proven to be challenging over the past few years. I would say that we shouldn't view action so far as mistakes. I mean, these are hard things to get governments anywhere across the world to buy into in the early days. This is essentially asking business as usual to be changed, business as usual, which has been formed over years and years, over multiple administrations of every shape, size, color, and variety across the world. So I think it's also okay to to recognize that these things are sometimes uphill battles that take time, and not necessarily view them as errors that need rectifying. So with that, I'll offer sort of 4 areas that I think could help in trying, to revive efforts to get Pakistan to engage with this voluntary membership of partnership of 78 countries. So I'd say the first thing, first area of action would be awareness raising. So even as, OGP as a partnership has grown significantly in the past decade, it was 8 countries when it launched in 2011, 78 today, a growing number of subnational governments, representing, all types of economic, socio-cultural, political systems. I think as one of our OGP ambassadors said a few years ago, it still remains a good idea that very few have heard about. So if getting the government to see the value in engaging with this platform is the task at hand, the first step needs to be that kind of broad-based awareness raising. And of course, organizations like Accountability Lab and many others in the Pakistani civil society space have been putting efforts to this, but this really needs amplification because it can't be left to a handful of organizations alone. And we at the International Secretariat, when we talk about OGP, one of the things that we always take pride in is saying that this truly is an international platform which rests on a fully domestically owned framework for advancing transparency, accountability, participation, as you've noted. But for that to work, for this narrative around a domestically owned framework to work, we do need to see the strong demand side for this in each country. It's not enough for the international partners and secretariats and us at the support unit to be the ones raising awareness. We need to see a strong sort of broad-based awareness campaign coming out of a multi-stakeholder collaboration process in Pakistan. I think as part of this awareness raising, there are 2 things that need to be front and center. One is connecting the opportunity of OGP to real issues, right? Not selling it as a technocratic exercise, not about 78 countries, not about action plans and commitments and monitoring, but really an opportunity for Pakistanis to come together, agree on solutions to the challenges of the everyday, challenges that both government and civil society and citizens care about solving in the here and now, right? Some battles might be long drawn battles, but there are, I think, areas where consensus can be found with government on problems that need tackling, that everyone is interested in tackling in the moment. The second aspect, I think, of this awareness raising has to be myth busting. This is not true just in Pakistan, in both members and non-members and countries that have been inactive. We've seen a lot of misunderstanding develop about the platform over time. Really, the mechanism of OGP is simple. Government agrees to join voluntarily. Government and civil society convene. You agree on problems you want to tackle through open government approaches. Government makes concrete commitments that are ideally also co-implemented with civil society. And then these are independently assessed against their own stated goals. What the global platform offers is an opportunity for peer exchange, an opportunity to share successes and learn from failures. So I think there's a bit of myth busting to be done in this awareness raising about what OGP is and isn't, and really demystify the national component from the international component in the partnership. So that myth busting really needs to be a big part of that awareness raising toolkit. The second aspect, or the second action area, I would say, is advocacy, right? It's one thing to share awareness, to spread awareness. It's another to have a smart advocacy strategy and plan. And here I will borrow from wisdom of other much smarter advocates who've come before me. So I think that will have to have three components to it. The first is, what do you want, right? This is the easy bit. This is the bit where civil society is agreed on, which is, okay, we want the Pakistani government to re-engage with the OGP process. Then the second component of the advocacy is really unpacking who can give this to you, right? So at a decision-making level, of course, this will need the national cabinet to agree to re-engage with this process and, reappoint or reinstate a ministerial point of contact to take charge of the agenda, official working point of contact to, run the process. So I think it needs to, we need to perhaps unpack a bit more. Who are the people who can help reach these decision makers? How, what kind of messages will resonate with them? Which brings me to the third aspect of, what the advocacy going forward perhaps needs to look at, which is the hardest bit, which is why hasn't it happened so far, right? I think, Fayaz and others have shared attempts till date that have gone into it. And I think a serious, honest reflection about why it hasn't worked, thinking about what kind of incentives, advocacy is addressing. Are there opposing forces? Are there competing priorities? And even considering who the right messengers need to be at this particular moment in time. So really creating a much stronger value proposition that speaks to the incentives, the interests of the government at this time, right? A very normative normative pitch which says, do open government because open government is an inherently good thing. Even in the most open governments, that doesn't seem to work, right? We do need to tie it to the economic imperatives, the social imperatives that governments care about solving. And that brings me to the third piece, right? Which is forging alliances. Finding it was great to hear, representation from the KP government. And really there is something to finding allies both in government and outside, in the private sector, which of course Omar and others, on this panel will, we'll be talking about a bit as well. In the media, I think Nigeria is an excellent example from a wholly different part of the world, where my Google alerts on, the number of times it appears in the media, the word OGP and the range of issues it ends up getting linked to is really phenomenal, right? So I think a better alliance between the media, the private sector, Pakistani civil society and international partners would be one to look at, sort of seeing where that needs to be strengthened, recognizing you're already building off a base. And then the last and final, and I'll stop after this, is thinking about an adaptation technique, right? So, after all of that, ideally, as Fayaz said earlier, we would hope that the government would resume the OGP national dialogue, bring back civil society, private sector, provincial governments to start a fresh dialogue on, what kind of action plan and what kind of commitments would make sense in the current context, and submit this action plan by February of 2022. So there is some time for this. But after all that, if things still don't move, one of the things that I recommend to ineligible countries in the region, of which there are many, sadly, and both to government and civil society alike, is to adapt, right? To find allies in government who are not opposed to the basic idea of collaboration, right? This could be at the provincial level, it could be at a departmental level, it could be at a ministerial level, and replicate and adapt the core model of OGP. We do not have a trademark or a copyright on getting collaboration going, agreeing to do very specific things, agreeing to monitoring, learning, and then doing that on repeat, right? So the OG part of OGP is really a universal concept that does not need membership to any exclusive or inclusive club to come alive. So I think there is something to show, don't tell, and let success breed success. And so to have these mini experiments like they're doing in places like Taiwan now, which cannot join OGP for sort of geopolitical reasons, where they are taking the entire concept, the model, the mechanism, replicating it with the hope that they can make the case for why this can work and bring other people to to join forces. So in conclusion, I think these are the 4 ways to think about re-engagement, awareness raising, advocacy, alliance building, and adaptation. I swear I did not plan for these to be 4 A's as I was thinking about this, but there you have it. And I hope it sparks some ideas for how you can take this work forward. And of course, us at the support unit remain available to provide any assistance needed to government and civil society. Fayaz said that there were terms he didn't want to use. I want to once again reiterate that the OGP Steering Committee and Secretariat in this period of inactivity remain available to provide whatever assistance needed. So we're not seeing this as goodbye quite as yet.
Thank you so much, Riya, for sharing such a detailed response and helping us understand that what exactly is the OGP process. And we are really grateful that you are still open and trying to help us as much as possible to help us regain our status. So now I'll move towards the next speaker. Sidra is one of Pakistan's finest community builder. She's currently working as a special coordinator with I2I. So, Sidra, you have a lot of experience when we talk about working with youth, organizing advocacy events. And as Shreya recently mentioned, that one of the core aspects of OGP is advocacy. So, I want you to tell people that what are the major tools where through which, or what are the ways how through which through which youth can be educated on and advocating for the OGP membership values. So how did you do it? And how can anyone else replicate your model? So please share a little bit of your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Omar. Good morning, everyone. So we have a 68% population of youth, and it's booming, it's increasing. And that's the future of this country, right? And that's also essentially the future of this world. And not many know how to be, how to keep all these values of the governments, or all these manifestos that we see every day on our televisions, or in news, or on social media. How do we hold our representatives accountable? How do we hold our government accountable? Because there's barely any involvement. And when we look at youth, it's not just the youth that's succeeding and maybe probably making great strides in their careers. It's also the youth that's very disconnected from all of this, probably from media, from social media, that has never heard of probably the advancement that's happening around. And for them, even just like basic things like health and infrastructure and probably availability of education is what is the most important thing, but they don't know how to ask for these things. So essentially, like, there's so much that needs to be done for the government to be connected with the youth. And I'm glad that Daniel spoke about the great initiatives that KP government has taken. And I can assure that it has helped, because I've worked with some of the initiatives of the KP government, and I see that they're very inclusive. But is that inclusivity enough for just educating the youth on OGP and for bringing them on the same table? Because a lot of us sitting here and having this discussion are still on the other side of the table. So we could come up with mechanisms, but how are those mechanisms really just the right sort of mechanisms? Do they fit the table for people who are on the other side of the table, who are actually going to be affected by that? And just to ensure they're also part of the decision making. So for me, I think the one thing that I constantly advocate for is to tapping into communities. And while that sort of looks very difficult, it's not. You have so many non-governmental organizations. You have so many volunteer organizations working already in all these communities. So essentially what could be done is connecting with these community builders and getting them to propagate the idea of open government and just how this could benefit these communities, because as Shreya said, we have to do myth busting. We have to raise awareness regarding this, and you can't do that by just going from by being an outsider. You have to be a part of that community, so just tapping into communities that exist already. So this is going to make this process more inclusive as well and get more people involved as well. Apart from that, you have, where is your other youth? Most of your youth is in schools and universities and colleges. So reaching out to them, making them aware of these programs that the government is doing to make sure there's transparency, because your political decision making, while it sounds like a big word, your decision making starts at very early age, right? And this is how you keep, so you cannot isolate this future of your country from these decisions. So probably introducing modules or curriculum where you can talk about open government and how you can work with the government. The third thing that we have been doing at Dasan is that we've worked with a lot of non-governmental organizations where we act as as a connection between them and the youth, and we bring the youth under one umbrella where we discuss issues that could that they could benefit from, or that they have issues that they're facing but couldn't be reached to the government. So that has helped us immensely with educating youth on OGP and bringing people forward and connecting them, because you have to create that link that would just bring people under one umbrella where they would not feel that they're alienated, that they're outcasted, and their issues are important. So one such example would be that we did last year, we did series of events in Peshawar, Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, Skardu, and other remote areas where we collected around 40 to 50 people in every city. And these were not just like normal people, but like majority people, but these were minorities. So people who had, who came from different ethnicities, different religion, who were marginalized in any way, people who did not conform to a certain gender identity. And we discussed with them their issues and how we could keep the government accountable on those, how we could push the government to make decisions that were not leaving these people out. So doing that, I think, so these are the most important things for me that should be considered to educate the youth. Also, just another thing is that when we talk about digitization, so everything is digital now, right? And so there should be better mechanisms to market these programs. So I guess like one better example would be how with COVID, we came up with the mechanism of these telephone calls. When we were calling, we would hear this pre-recorded, message that would tell people how to go about, how to follow SOPs. So I kind of feel that was a very inclusive way for people who can't read or write in English, or who can't even read or write in Urdu or any local language. They could just, read this. So maybe doing more localized versions of these messages could also help people benefit. So this is what I believe could just like, play a small part in connecting the youth and educating the youth more on OGP.
Okay, thank you so much, Sidra, for sharing your views. It was really insightful. And now we are moving towards the last section. That is basically we are opening the floor for questions. So all the people who are currently a part of the session and have been with us since this started. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat box. So we will take the questions one by one. So one question that I have here is, let me check. Yeah, so we have a couple of people who have introduced themselves in the beginning, and then we have Ali's question. Okay, so we have one question from Cherry. So Ms. Basu's point about connecting OGP to variety of issues and amplifying that message is great and can make topic relatable for citizens. What can CSOs do better to build the case for OGP through media? So Shreya, if you can talk a little bit about that aspect, that how can media play a little bit more role? So that would be great.
Thanks for that question. It's an important issue, and I also want to acknowledge it's a difficult issue in most places, right? Because I think in a lot of context, you see that the media bites more easily on a negative story than a positive story, right? And if on the one hand you're trying to come across as positive collaborators of government, on the other hand, then partnering with media with that particularly negative lens that can sometimes be taken is a hard one, right? And I would be overstating if I said that too many OGP countries have cracked this nut successfully, or even if we have, as globally as a partnership have. That said, I think there are a couple of things, and again, I think the most interesting examples, from where I sit, I see from Nigeria, right? So when you have, as many parts around the world are witnessing, protests for all kinds of reasons, whether those are happening in streets or what they're happening in the classroom or in other settings where there is an expression of discontent and frustration. Finding ways, I think what I see done very effectively in Nigeria is being able to find those one or two journalists within media who can immediately connect those issues and say, by the way, the government also has made this international obligation to work on these types of issues. And here are some positive examples of how this can be done, right? So without necessarily constantly hammering home a point that has perhaps been made too often, which that the government needs to re-engage, finding allies, journalists, colleagues in media who can make those links, be able to tap into the problems or challenges that this relates to, but also be able to show that here's a path forward that might resonate, in the Pakistani context, in being able to take things forward. And that's where the wider global community can be something that we can help you tap into to find those examples that resonate, right? Because constantly asking for the one thing that you're not getting by asking in the same way is not necessarily going to be an effective strategy, whether that's done through the media or otherwise. And I think the second piece of it is also finding perhaps the right the balance between and having, I think, picking on what Sidra was saying earlier, a little bit of, you need the insider strategy as well as the outsider strategy. So in these alliances that are forged between civil society and media, thinking again, what are the spaces, what are the channels where perhaps it's more effective to come up with a more hard-hitting message, and which are the places and channels and corridors of influence where you want to lead with a more positive message around where look to the partnership as a solution to problems and not just look to the partnership as an international compliance requirement you're not meeting. And I think
Yeah.
what we're learning is that positive message is usually tend to carry much further than the negative ones.
Sure. So thank you so much, Ria, for explaining your point. So we have another question. It is for Daniel. So Daniel, how can we make KP government initiatives to support OGP values a success, and what lessons can other province adopt as a starting point in their respective provinces? So a little bit of your thoughts on it. That what are the main key lessons, and what are the do's and don'ts that you did differently?
Okay, thank you for that question, Ali. That's a very relevant and very important question. So, in terms of an example for other provinces, I think if you look at the Right to Information Commission, now KP government is considered as one of the most proactive provincial government in Pakistan, which has been actively working in this domain. If you go to the website Right to Information and you just request them an information, they are bound to give you information back in 7 days. And even, in fact, they have made a whole chart of how to access information from them. So if you are in case of emergency, you can access that information in a matter of 2 days. And in normally that's like 7 days. So you see, like when you have practices like this, where anyone can get information from there. And they have also posted success stories. Like some of the success stories that I can mention over here are a person had passed a test, but he had not received the merit list, which he had requested from the government. So he posted his case on the Right to Information Commission over there, and the RTI Commission provided them the person with the merit list, and because of that, he got the job. So this is where you build the trust with the citizen, with the general public. And once you publish those stories, those success stories, like that's how the confidence level of the general public improves. So this is one of the example that I would mention here, that which is an exemplary example for other provinces to adopt. Secondly, I would like to quote an example of Directorate of Science and Technology. They're currently making a policy of science, technology, and innovation, a roadmap for the whole province. And how they are doing it by publishing all the information online, as well as they are doing the offline part of it. They are holding consultations with all the stakeholders. And again, each step, the information that is collected from the civil society, from the government department, from the legislatures, that is being posted online. Now imagine a province which is financially not very in a good position, yet they have taken some initiatives, whether call it in the domain of technology integration. Maybe they are not directly in line with the OGP, but they are in line with the technology integration, which is somehow supporting the same agenda of the OGP. So as a starting point, these are something that I believe are very good initiatives. Some of the initiatives that I would reiterate again: Khyber Pakhtunkhwa IT Board, Right to Information Commission, and Directorate of Science and Technology. If you go to their website, if you check out the information over there, you'll find a lot of good practices which the other provinces can adopt in their own provinces as well. I hope that answers your question.
Sure. Thank you so much, Daniel. So we have like around 5 minutes left. So I will take one more question. So in fact, we can take a little, two more questions. So then I'll start concluding it. So one question, the closing one. So we can just keep it brief. So Sidra, I wanted to ask this particular question from you. Like, you have done a lot of events. So when we talk about inclusivity, so how were you able to make that happen in your events? Because most of the time, these marginalized communities do not have the right to say. And if we look at the OGP, and they are also part of the community, so how do you reach out to them? How do you ensure that? Just one quick comment.
So when we say events, it's such a fancy word, right? So when we keep saying that word, we just like imagine like a community of people sitting in a very nice space and discussing these issues. The first and foremost part is, and that's just like mentioned on the screen as well, that we have a very small and shrinking civic space. So as I said earlier, and I would reiterate that you need to go into these communities and you need to reach out to people who have influence in these communities. So this could be an outsider who has been able to make an impact in the community, or this could be someone in the community who has a lot of impact, and you reach out to them and you win over them and you let them know that this is a good thing that we're trying to do, and this is how this could benefit your community. This is what is there for you in this. So one example could be when we were doing our series of events for Shana, we didn't know anybody in Skardu. In fact, like nobody from our team had been to Skardu. So what we did was that we connected with people from their community who carried a lot of impact. And in return, we could reach out to 50s of people who basically listened to us and trusted us enough to share their stories with us, so we could spread that message across. Apart from that, just one thing that I keep on saying is opening public spaces. Your public spaces are not open for women like me. Your public spaces are not safe for children. How are you going to ensure a safe dialogue when your public spaces aren't open? How many people can afford mobility, or how many people can afford to travel to all these other places where these dialogues happen? So many people are disconnected. So opening public space conversations, going back to your own system, Daniel is from KP. So we had these systems where people would come and sit in a hujra. So that's like a gathering of people. You create such safe spaces for women, for children, for men, and bringing these government representatives to them if this is like an untapped area, telling them how they could use technology to just change anything. So technology isn't just going online, but also just making a call. That's something they could do, right? So doing these things on your end, making it more accessible, more convenient for people, I guess that's what we've been doing as well. We've been like, finding these loopholes in the system and trying to take that and turn them into a positive. So that's what we've been doing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sidra. So I will take just one last question, and that is directed to Fayaz. So Fayaz, as we were mentioning earlier, that there are a lot of independent initiatives being done and taken up by various bodies, be it private or be it government. But there is like no coordination. Like we spoke a little bit about some of the issues, like Pakistan has launched this Citizens Portal app, and then they have something called Alif Elan, and these are the initiatives. But as you mentioned, that we lack a formal direction to it. So how can we make sure or connect all these dots, all these organizations that are working in silos, and make sure that we have a national action plan in place? So a little bit of your thoughts on it, and then we will formally conclude.
Thank you, Umar. I would like to, pick with where what Shreya said. Open
Sure.
government as a concept is a universal sort of concept. It has its own benefits for the citizens. And in Pakistan's case, it's heartening to know that government is taking up so many initiatives, and I would also like to pinpoint one particular recent initiative which is called the Tiger Force thing. That too in a way is sort of a step towards the right direction, asking people to sort of monitor various government bodies and private businesses and report what the sort of corruption which is happening over there. However, what my point was that to provide legal cover to that, at the moment, Tiger Force is not legally covered. They are open to abuse. People have every right to deny them entry into their office buildings. When you have signed up for that, and you provided legal cover, and it's covered by a framework, around it. People start taking an ownership of it. At the moment, it's sort of it's government's own prerogative. On one hand, they are sort of telling people that these are the great initiatives which we have provided to provide services on the doorstep of the people of the government. On the second hand, when people on the other side, when people really want to make use of those services, the services are denied. And then there are so many examples. The way the way bureaucracy have dealt with right to information. I mean, government had to introduce so many layers of if one particular public official do not provide you information, go to the other one, and if that doesn't provide you, go to that level. And it's rigmarole of unnecessary steps. Why don't we ask the government to share those information proactively if they concern citizens? It's citizens' property. It should be shared with the citizens, in a proactive manner. And also, in the cases where the government is not, it's just a step. Even, you talked about citizen portal, there is no legal cover for that. It's just an order from the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister Secretariat will take a notice if some government public official would not, comply to the complaint of the citizens. And that's it, no punishment, remarks, being added to the ACR of that public official, no opening up of data, how people's needs are being met. So that is the concern. Things have to be done in a more formal, in a more comprehensive manner, so that people are able to see that the benefits of those initiatives, and the trust needs to be built. Once people are able to see the benefits of these initiatives, I think they'll be, a lot more of them. They'll start using these tools, which are being created by KP government and the federal government. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. So for being a part of this particular event. So just to conclude, we had Ms. Shreya who spoke a little bit, who spoke comprehensively on the best practices and how the countries can be a part of it. Daniel shared a very interesting case study of how KP government is working on various issues in making sure that OGP is Pakistan is complying to the OGP. Similarly, Sidra spoke not only on the civic spaces, but she also explained a little bit about how she has used the community builders to advocate for the cause, which is one of the core foundations, as mentioned by Shreya, when we talk about OGP, because that's one of the four pillars. And similarly, Fayaz gave us a very comprehensive explanation of what exactly is OGP, where Pakistan stands, and how we can connect all the dots and make sure that we all move towards that one national goal. Just to conclude, I would just say that transparent governments will make sure that we have prosperous countries. Thank you so much for being a part of it. So you have we shared the contact details of our speakers, which you can see, and similarly we have now ancillary activities where you can be a part of it. Thank you so much for being a part of this particular event, and I'm signing out from Sayyed Umar Ameed from Dastan, and on behalf of Accountability Lab Pakistan. Thank you so much.